is this more timely?
Wow.
I think, are streaming.
We're good to go. Looks like we're good to go.
Hey, we are now live. I
Sure
think
looks like it.
we are. I can see us. We are live. Yes, yes.
Yes. Amazing.
Finally, we made it, Neil.
It's okay, man. We here. This digital
Right?
world, man. We here.
We're here, and that's what matters. And hello, everyone. If you guys are now tuning in to our session, we've started a few minutes late, but I so appreciate you coming on, and we finally made it. Let's talk, Neil, about the subject matter today. We are talking all about the idea of the traditional marriage and how that resonates in our community. Even in general, the idea of, you know, the white dress and you know, in the eyes of God, till death do we part. I would love to know what your thoughts are about this, because even today, right before this live, I had my own little situation in my relationship, and maybe getting it even from a male perspective will be a handy, wonderful thing.
That's all I can offer is just my perspective, my experiences. I'm not an expert, but I am an expert in my experiences. So.
Hey, and that's all we can do, and I love that space. So when we think about the marriage, it's like one word that first comes to mind when you think of marriage.
I think of institution, commitments comes to mind as well. Family structure comes to mind. Yeah, those are some of the first things that come to mind right off the top when I think of marriage. Yeah.
I found that it's so interesting when you said the word institution.
Yeah.
That was the very first word that came to mind.
Right.
And when you think about that, like, what does that mean for you, the word institution?
What comes to mind when I think of institution is this other like force or structure that has like say and has some kind of like influence or some kind of dabbling in my relationship, my affairs, you know, like there's a certain set of structure that was already predetermined, and I am now being ushered into this like flow, you know, like that's what comes to mind when I think of like institution. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I kind of love this because it's almost the exact same thing for me, Neil. Like I have to give full disclosure. I've been married a couple times.
All right. Okay. It's all good. Yeah.
Right. I'm definitely. I think I start with this. I was raised in a very traditional family structure. Like my parents have been married for 52 years. And I think I mentioned in our last live that my dad still looks at my mom with like these gaga eyes, right?
Yes,
like
yes.
He's crazy in love with her. I don't know so much about her. I shouldn't say that. I know my mama loves my dad.
Of course.
But the way they relation is probably very different.
Totally get that.
Right? So I grew up just expecting that to be what it was, right? Like I never thought or saw the idea of divorce or parents not having this kind of arrangement, right?
Yeah.
But I got pregnant at 17.
Okay.
And to be honest, there was some arrogance involved. As I look back on that situation now, it wasn't really an oopsie. Sorry, Mom, if you watch this. It wasn't necessarily an oopsie. Right. I was caught up in that the hubrisness of youth, where you know you really don't think things can happen to you, but you
Yeah.
kind of maybe do think things can happen to you. For
Right.
me, I wasn't happy in my home situation.
Okay.
I arrogantly thought I could do it better.
Right.
And I think for me, I got
Mm.
pregnant with this understanding that I was going to form my own family. And so that myself and my child's father
Hmm.
of that time would end up, you know, happily married, and I'd finish school, get my career, and we'd somehow live dynasty. I don't know, we'd find
Right.
oil in our backyard or something,
Of
just
course,
like
yes. Build that empire, man. Yes.
right?
Of
Right?
course.
That was the thought. But I recognize as I look back now how woefully unprepared I was for understanding what it takes to create that space of a real relationship.
Mm.
And,
Yeah.
you know, two 17-year-olds are our children, right? We were literally children trying to become, like we were wearing shoes that were 5 sizes too big. You know, I liken it to that, like when you see a toddler wearing the shoes.
Yeah. Totally.
So our relationship, we were together for 9 years solid.
Okay.
And then we broke up, and it was one of those, you know, breakups where like seriously caught cases, you know,
Okay.
we both caught some cases.
Yeah.
Right?
Those,
It was
kinda sticky.
volatile. We
Yes.
had a very passionate love.
Right.
You know
Right.
who you are. We had a very passionate love.
Yes.
Even to this day, you
Mm.
know, we kind of, you know, he looks at me, I'll look at him. We may, you know,
Yeah.
would never go there, but
Right,
I'll
but
look at him, he looks at me. You know what I'm saying?
It's annoying. Yes.
Right. I would not touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Right.
Would not. Midnight. But back to the story now.
Yes.
So our relationship was very volatile, toxic on many levels. We had passionate love. We did love each other, but as I said, not equipped for the responsibilities of being in that time and space. And the one thing about my partner at that time,
Yeah.
and it's still, and I think it really plays into what we're talking about today, is I used to call him the community man. Because
what does that mean? What does community man mean?
Well, let's just say he was never mine. I shared that man. You know what I'm saying? If I take it back to Jay-Z's song, you know, let's take it back to Jay-Z's song when he was talking about
Is that your chick?
The song where he goes, "You share that girl."
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Right?
Is that your chick? You know that
That's
song?
right.
Yeah,
I have to go, is that my man?
Oh.
Yeah, right? Is that your chick? Is that my man? Because I shared that man, right? We were together for 9 years, and I would say on average, I caught him at least once every 3 months.
Wow.
With somebody else. So the level of drama, level of drama.
Imagine.
There were, I
for
can
sure.
think about, and any of my friends who know me from them times will know, because it was always that kind of drama with us. The relationship ran on that kind of relationship, that level. There had to be at least 25 women I had caught him through over the space of that period of time that we were together. So needless to say, there was some damage done.
Yeah, for sure.
In how I viewed relationship, how I moved through the world. And we had 2 young children together.
Right, yes.
And as I look back now on that particular relationship, I mean, we've now kind of been able to be friends. There's just more to it. Like we are able to be cordial. At the time, it was very much a challenge because of all the hurt as well that was involved in it. Yeah. But what I recognize is that he, even to this day, still can be a little bit more of a philanderer. he enjoys to going and being with more than one woman at a time.
Okay.
And I think I look at this idea of where I sat in my naivete and how we were set up in society even to believe that, okay, I got pregnant young, you know, he had to do the right thing, and
Right.
doing the right thing meant sticking with me.
Right.
Right. And when I think about it, all the indications from the beginning showed ready for that. And I don't think genuinely wanted it.
Right. Right.
Right. But
But
because we
yeah,
were
the irresponsible
conditioned
condition. Yeah.
by it, created a scenario. And
Mm.
I just think as we moved on, after we separated, I married somebody else, got with
Yeah.
somebody else, and that's a whole other story.
Okay.
We divorced. And then my present partner, who I'm with now, I look at, you know, we've had some conversations. He would kind of bring his other girlfriends and other children's mothers to me,
Okay.
even after we were done. And I used to always be like, I'm not, first of all, I don't understand why you would do it, because I ain't got very nice things to say. Like,
Right.
right? I
Right.
know who you are, so I ain't gonna cover for you or nothing. But I used to say to him, by the end of that, I would say, you know, why not just choose to be honest?
Yes.
Instead of creating
Oh.
dramas in the way that you do, why put all of the women, you know, all of your girls, all of your women, and just say, look, I can't. How about if we're all about this? Could we have made it work? And I had posed that question to myself after I'd mentioned it to him. And I had thought,
Mhm.
you know what? If he had been honest with me, Shin, we might have been able
Right. Yeah.
to have worked something out. Because at least what really destroyed the relationship, I believe, is not just, you know, the other women. Actually, I don't even think it was really about that. It was all of the lies and
Yes.
betrayals, because the premise to which we had set up the relationship on
Right.
was skewed. And that's
Right.
based upon this idea of what a marriage is supposed to look like, what we consider the family structure. So I give
Right.
you that whole
Yeah. Yeah.
story, right?
Yes.
To ask you, what do
Yeah.
you really think about the whole idea of marriage being in this very binary, it must be two people who stick together. We celebrate when it's a longevity thing, you know,
Hmm.
and this partnership is the only way to raise our children. Do you believe that's real?
I mean, it can be like I would never like dismiss and say that like that reality can't exist, but I think from a guy's perspective, especially in the context of like not being like honest and having desires and things of that nature, it goes to a lot of like how we're conditioned, or maybe there's a time where that was expressed and then it was shut down. So it's like, oh, I can't express in this way, so I got to be sneaky about it and to accommodate, and because you don't want to break anybody's hearts though. But the truth is, it's like when the lies like pile up, like they do that anyways, and a lot of times it's even more devastating, and that time could have been saved from the jump of just being like real and honest. So I think like a lot of like us men, including myself, have gotten caught up in that cycle. But I do agree, like I've definitely been in a position where I felt safe enough to be honest about my desires, and you know really share that I have desire for more than one person, and to actually be able to like create something out of that just from being honest though. But that, for me to even get to a place of being honest and trying to have the emotional intelligence and the communication that comes with that to handle with care, so that there's understanding and to really like create a relationship that you desire, like took a lot of like time to even get there, a lot of mistakes, in order to be honest. But I do realize that there's like a power in choice, and I think like a lot of the devastating things that happen in relationships because the choice was taken away,
Mhm.
or that a certain reality was created and then to realize that it's totally falsified, and then that's devastating because you start questioning yourself and everything around you. It's like fake. This what was meaningful, what was real, and what wasn't. But to be like, hey, like this is just where I'm at, and this is something that we can explore, have a conversation, and then to give the person that you're with like the opportunity to either say, okay, maybe this is something I can explore, or maybe I need more information about, or maybe I'm totally not for that. But to give that option like that, usually goes in a more healthier space. And then sometimes, like, you know, the relationship can still be intact, but it just may look different. It may not look intimate in the same way, but you may realize that, okay, this is someone of value that I do want in my life, but now it's going to like exist in a certain way. So there's so many different variables, but I think the bottom line when it comes to like, you know, marriage and whatnot is connection. And then it's like, how do we have that connection? How do we have something that's meaningful, that's healthy, that works for us and the things that are around us? You know, I often think about, you know, going back to the institution of marriage, like the history of it and the beginning parts, you know, how it was kind of like set up in a way where like women were just property, you know what I mean? And really marriage almost seemed like it was a contract between the husband or soon to be husband and the father, really, right? Because it was like a passing down of property in a way. So like the man would ask the permission of the father, like as opposed to like the wife, you know what I mean? And then that would become, you know, like property of the man, you know. So that has a certain dynamic. So the question is it marrying for love, or is it marrying for status, stability? Who knows what else, various things come with that, you know. And then on top of that, it was also like the factor of like, you know, and again, like, you know, there's many cultures and many variations, but I think this is more of like a Western, like Eurocentric perspective where, you know, like the female would then get like the last name of the husband, you know, the property. But that was really, you know, to ensure that the legacy is solid and known, right? Because there could be the potential that, okay, the child may not be mine, but if I have this stamp of approval, I know that it's mine, and it's really the control over the woman's womb, more so importantly than the actual woman herself, you know. And so when I think of these kind of foundations in the institution, like these are things that come to mind. And the question is like, is it really about love and connection, you know, or is it more of a status because we've been told? I mean, we look at like Disney movies and films and stuff like that, you know, the Cinderella story, you know, like did Cinderella really marry for love, Prince Charming or whatever, or was it really for her to get out of like an abusive situation, you know? Like there's so many like angles to look at it. And but I think it starts with honest conversation. Me myself, I've never been, oh, I know if you want to jump in, I know I'm just kind of going off, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm listening because you're
Oh,
bringing up so many points that I'm like, keep going,
okay,
keep going,
so
finish off what you're saying, because then I got some things to say after that.
yeah, so all these different factors, you know, but then me growing up, like I kind of saw like duality. So I saw like the stability of a marriage, which was my grandmother and my grandfather on my mom's side, married for like a lot of years and whatnot. Rest in peace to my grandfather and whatnot. But seeing that union and how the family unit operated as like as a movement or as like I don't want to call it a business, but kind of, but just like this unit, you know, like of a certain idea, a certain way of being, and that stability that comes with it. There's a certain harmony and structure, you know, that I saw. And then, you know, being raised with my mom, you know, who's generally like, you know, single and, you know, not married, and then, you know, seeing her as like an independent person, you know what I mean? So I saw, okay, well, there's more than one way to be, like, you know, like if you don't get married, that's okay too. Like, you know, I mean, sure, there's the challenges and the benefits that come with it, just like marriage and so on and so forth. But it was really about seeing those options. So for me, being born and raised in the time period that I'm at, like the urgency to get married wasn't there. Like I grew up in an era where I knew that, you know, I would be a father, but I knew that in order to be a father, like that wouldn't necessarily, you know, mean I would have to get married, unlike once upon a time. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people got married because they wanted, you know, I'm trying to get some, you know. But you know, growing up in an era where it's like, you know, you growing up in an era where you have like the choice, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, the urgency isn't there. And sometimes I know in conversations in relationships that I've had, that would come up, and then it was almost like this like fear of like commitments. And I'm like, no, that's not quite what it is. It's just that I don't know, like I just don't feel like I need to rush into it. Maybe there's more to explore, maybe more to understand, and there's different dynamics. And then what can I create that works for me and my partner? So many variables as to being like, okay, you're a certain age, you're supposed to have this status, and that's what it is. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I love everything that you've mentioned here because you're touching upon what I think is some of the nitty gritty to
Right.
what really has constituted this space of what we have seen marriage in. So like, for one, let's take, for instance, how we approach marriage from that traditional sense. And let's give some of the history lesson about that.
Yeah.
When marriage was, I had read this book years ago that used to talk about marriage in like the 1300s. And really all it was at that point was the, regular folk would get together, dude would see his woman,
Right.
Class, dude would see a woman and they may look at each other and go, you know what, we're going to hook up. Let's run to the forest. Let me wrap something around your hand. You wrap something around my hand, and we married now. That's it. That's how we're gonna hook up. And I thought that was so interesting, because what we have seen always displayed has started from exactly what you were talking about. Marriage used to be a transactional space that was about land, as well as keeping family lineages in certain area cohesiveness and keeping money in the family. So really this institutionalized understanding of marriage formed from that upper elite class, not the regular Joe Schmoes. It was that upper elite class that made this traditional marriage, because it was about making sure your dollars stayed where you needed it to be. And the woman was the transactional space of that dollar. Her womb was the commodity that was intact. So you're exactly correct that somewhere over our historic space, and let's also involve that the church also got involved in this historically, because when we were talking about a realm where we had royalty, or those elite classes that ruled the peasantry, there a lot of how you stayed in power was about conquering land masses. Right. We know all about that as Black folk. We've been conquered and divided and taken along all those other ways. So what they would do is to keep land profitable and in that sphere of these elite classes, they didn't want to decipher it out. They would intermarriage. And so that's why it became so important. And also the church, one of the reasons why Catholic priests were no longer allowed to marry is because they realized that the church owned a lot of property. And if they got married, priests would then have families, and they'd have to divide out the wealth. So that's one of the reasons why they have to take those vows of chastity, because there's dollars involved. So I think it's very Let me bring that. So I think it's And so marriage is very much, and even now, as you look at when you are legally in a marriage, that is about a contract. You and your partner, your spouse, actually are considered a corporation. Have you ever wondered why?
What?
Have you ever wondered why? Think about when let me stay with me on this one, because when you think about it, when you go through a divorce now, when you think about when we look at our taxable basis for what who we tax in society overall, it is normally double income families who sit in the most taxable bracket. You and your legal marriage, it forms a separate entity. When you're signing all those licenses and regulations, you're literally signing it into that you are in a contract with the state. That's why we can't, you can have like a spiritual union, which is what me and my husband have now. We have not done it legally on the books this time. For various reasons. And I recognize that that's really what the foundational space of it is. So the church and the state have actually gotten into our bedrooms, and it's used as the formation for monetary gain, because that's the level of who is taxed at the highest level. Most people make in between that, $100,000, $60,000 to $100,000 range, right? That's the most. If you look at who gets taxed the most,
interesting.
That's the range. And those are the people with the kids, with the mortgage, you know, been married, you know, 10 years in. That's the level.
It's interesting you say that. Something just came to mind right now, is this like idea of just like social order. Like there's this like system that just keeps things just like in place. Like as you're talking, that's all I just visualize. I'm just like, oh, okay. You know, because like now you can like group people, and, you know, people are stationary in their position, and, you know, you can keep track of everything. Like this family's here, this family's there. I don't know. Like that's interesting. I never looked at it that way.
And we don't look at it that way. And then we've introduced things like Disney. Disney has been detrimental. I talk about Disney often, to how we as women, we all got to stop feeding our children Disney. We got to stop feeding our sons and our daughters Disney. It is not real, right? Right?
I fall into the trap, man. I'm not going to front, man. Like, yeah.
I've had conversations with some of my girlfriends now, as we are looking back on it and recognizing how this idea that our prince is going to come, that sometime we're going to swoon and we are going to find the love of our lives, and he's going to sweep us off our feet. But we also recognize we want dynasty too. We know we want both mixed together. Has been this skewed version of how romantic love really functions. And so we've all believed that romantic love is what is the foundations for building a marriage, when in truth, it's not necessarily about the romance. Romance, those endorphins that happen in those initial stages, that they only last a little while. You know, you're lucky if you get a year out of it. You're lucky. You're lucky. And there are things we can do to keep that going, right? But the reality of it is that it has to be based on something a lot deeper, a lot more foundational than this space of what we've been told traditional marriage romantic love being the foundation, when really what it is making sure that you can pay that mortgage, that, you know, the kids are going to be stable, and build the stability for your children. You got to have a different kind of relationship than what we have been told we should have. So, you know, as I look at traditional marriage, most of the people, you know, my people have been around for a little bit, and a lot of us have been in marriages for, you know, 10 plus years. And the statistics on marriage, I think it's important to recommend to mention, is that by year 5, I think it is, 50% of marriages are failing. By year 10, I think they say that almost another 25% of marriages fail. And then I think it's something like, when you go outside of that, you lose another 15 or 20% of the original marriages that are together. So literally only probably about 20% of marriages survive long term.
And I wonder, like, why that is.
We don't look at these statistics. Well, this is the thing. I don't have it handy. I have this book. Once again, I'm going to bring it out. I tote this book quite often. It's called Sex at Dawn. This is a book.
I'm writing this down right now.
Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan. Ryan and his partner is Cecilda Jethra. And this book literally has changed kind of how I look at the reality of how we see marriage or partnership. In this book, he goes back into like human sexuality and taking a look at how we have partnered agricultural age, because that's when marriage started to become a thing, when we started to put down roots and say, hey, we're going to be married now, right? We want land. And when we brought the land in is when we brought in this idea of stability and having to have marriage and stuff. Before that, when we were hunter and gathering, we were not we weren't tied into the spaces in the same way, right?
Mm.
So there seems to be a lot more of a freedom in the way that we had partnership. Sex would be about community. Having
Right.
lovemaking and pleasure was about building your social structure. You know, you're mad at me, oh, let's have sex now. Let's get over it. Come on.
Done.
And,
Yeah.
right? And that could be, you know, partner over there, or, you know, whoever over there. It wasn't about you are mine.
Right.
It wasn't coming from a possessive space.
Right.
It was about continuation of a community space to
Right.
which that we had these structures. And it's very interestingly that some more matriarchal based tribal spaces had much more of an open type relationships, open type marriages. There was a group in South Asia, I think it was, where what they their structure was that the women of the village would build their homes.
Okay.
And at night, any man can visit their homes for 2 hours. So every woman, when they hit a certain age, so I think it's like 16, right? They would build themselves their own home, and every guy got to dude hop. You got to go wherever you wanted to go. Whoever's home you felt like, bet it's, you know, it's Susie tonight, you know, bet it may be Rebecca tomorrow, but that's good. They hooked up.
Right.
And I think they had like a time span. You get 2 hours a night and you get the hell out, right? You go back to your crib, we're here.
Right.
And when Rebecca got pregnant, it did not matter who the father was. The every male in the village would be responsible. Every male would be called daddy. And what that allowed was, not only was it that the households were open so that particular child could go to anybody's home, they could also know that, say, unfortunately, if, you know, Bob died tonight, let's say, Bob died an unfortunate demise, there would still be 20 other daddies to be able 100%. To hold that space.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody worried about the paternity of who was who. It was the village's child.
And that mindset still like resonates with me. It always has, you know, like for sure. Absolutely.
And I agree with you. I believe that there are some of us who are swans, you know, swans made for life. I had this beautiful experience this year where I got to watch two swans with their ducklings, and not ducklings, what are they called? Goosling? I can't remember what you call male swan. Swans.
Well, I got to
watch them mother and father these swans, because it was just down the street from me. I'm blessed where I live. Right. And it was so interesting to watch how they would switch off. Right?
Amazing.
Like,
oh, wow. Yeah.
He would go out, you would see they're all both looking tired. They had like 6 little badass little dumb swans, you know? Yeah. And, you know, he'd go off, he'd get the food, he'd come back. She'd be looking at him like, why'd you do this to me? You know, and then he'd be like, look, it's my turn. So he'd go, and then she'd get a minute to herself. It was interesting to watch the dynamic. So I thought that was a beautiful thing. But I also recognize that this other dynamic, this idea of that the family, that the community can raise in and be in close, loving proximity to raise a child has value as well.
100%.
And our closest relative to our phenotype, they always say it's the chimpanzee, but for human beings, it's actually who is our primate? It is the bonobo. That's who it is.
Bonobo.
The bonobo.
I don't even know what that is. You're gonna have to break it down for me.
The bonobo is a primate. They're cute. They're really cute, actually. But they have the closest genetic phenotype to us. And it, you know, they don't look at them very often, but they act very human-like. And one of the ways that they socialize is they're very free sexually.
Right.
They are, you know, they can be, they have homosexuality,
Right.
they have, free love, they're all about, orgies and community, and they do that very same thing where every one of their babies is very
Right.
much a communal baby space.
No doubt.
And he breaks that down in this book. He looks very much at who our closest primate relative is, how that has shown up. And historically, when we look at the spaces of how we've come through this reality and truth, that we have not always been binary, that
Right.
there are many of us
Yeah.
who do not exist in a binary space. And
Yeah,
is
never
that
have. Yeah.
is that a real truth? Because I agree with you. I thought when I was 17 and
Mhm.
partnered with my children's father at that time, that I wanted that.
Right.
And as I look at it now, I know that we would have had a relationship. Do you remember that cartoon Spy versus Spy? I don't know if you
Yeah.
you know that cartoon?
Yes.
Was it Natasha with Spy versus Spy?
Right.
We would have been that.
Right.
I
right,
know
right.
that as I look at who I am now, 17-year-old me and 47-year-old me
Right.
recognize that,
Right.
yeah, very different spaces
For
in
sure.
how I would choose to be in partnership. And I know that there's no way I could have been with just one partner for that entire time.
For sure.
It's just not who I sit in. And I often wonder about people that I know. And when we think about marriage
Yeah.
in the traditional sense,
Mhm.
how many people, and this is a question, how
Sure.
many people do you know that you can really say have that relationship, that marriage,
Mhm.
that you're like, man, I wish I could be in it. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like they're still looking at each other and they can't walk past each other without touching or being in that space. Like, do you know of many couples that live that way?
Not many. I could think of like two right off the top, like out of like, I don't know, let's say like 20 couples or something like that. And that's not to say that that doesn't exist in, other relationships, because sometimes, they're just not as like, visible with it and, public displays and whatnot. But like exactly what you're talking about. I know what you're saying, where it's just like, oh, these two were destined for each other. Like they probably knew each other in past lives, and you know what I mean? Like you just know, and they just have a certain like synergy like to them, but yeah, that's like, like a really small like handful of that I've seen. Yeah.
Right. And so I look at how we have, and I agree, because it's the same thing for me. I can literally think of two
Yeah.
that I can think of, because I kind of don't, my parents are odd. Like, yeah. So I
It's
don't,
still love though. It's still love.
it's still love.
Yeah.
And that is a thing. Like people have their own dynamics. So
That's it.
yes,
That's it.
absolutely. But when we talk or look at this idea of having relationships that really service us,
Okay.
you know what I mean?
Okay.
Being in absolute service to your humanness, to
Yes.
allowing you to be supported in that way of loving, that really allows you to be in the greatness of yourself. Very few of us, right,
Yeah.
are held in that way. And I think what we're moving to, however, is what we're really looking for. I think we've offering,
Yes.
there's a level of awareness that's happening in society today,
Mhm.
where the idea of traditional sense of marriage is shifting
It is
quite a bit.
100%. Yeah.
Right? Because the history of it was about a property, it being about property, being about keeping family lineage, keeping these different
Yes.
things. But I think society has shifted so much
Yeah.
that the model for this doesn't necessarily fit where we are today.
Yeah, and I think it's because like a lot of us, growing up, like I'm born 82, you know what I mean? So like a lot of us growing up, we've seen a lot of like, dysfunction, or even just like people, in relationships just for the sake of the kids, whatever. We know very well. It's like, y'all ain't happy, man. Y'all just here for us. And it's like why do that? Like we it's cool. Like live your life, kind of mentality. And so like recognizing that there could be alternatives to live. I mean, there's people who live together, but aren't married or whatever, and they have that certain agreement. Or maybe it's more than one person and they're all living together. Maybe there's blended families that come together in various intersections. There's so many like possibilities that can exist. And I think, like you said, it's really about personal desires and structures that work, because like having like we were talking about like Blac Chyna and like her scenario, and having like her partner having like another boyfriend and whatnot, and she's just kind of cool with it. But for a lot of people, like they don't understand that, and like we're saying, like that takes a lot of like maturity and a lot of like honesty and truth, and there's a certain, I think, level just like of like knowledge of self that comes with that, where you can just kind of stand in your own and be like, oh, that's cool, like like my love isn't in jeopardy because it goes over here. Like, I mean, for a lot of people, like love is like this infinite energy, and it just goes where it needs to go, and there's enough for everyone. But I think the problem is like the honesty and just being really, really clear, and then also given that choice. So like that's a major thing that has changed, I think, societal wise, that there's many options and just many variations of what relationships can look like, especially when the goal is about just being happy. You know what I mean? Like just to go back to Blac Chyna, there was a lot of focus on her boyfriend having a boyfriend and really focusing on that sexuality. And for me, it's always interesting when that becomes like the focus, as opposed to like, okay, well, how does this relationship work? Do they actually love each other? Are they supportive? Like, let's start there. And then, sex and other like desires, could be discussed after. But the primary function is like, how does that actually work for them? So.
You're hitting where I just so wanted us to go, is this idea of relationships, once again, having to look like in that binary space. And you're exactly right. Blac Chyna's situation, where she was, her boyfriend had the boyfriend and she was cool with it, was beautiful for them. And actually is a viable model, even though for many people it can't seem like one. And that falls under the modicum. I'm going to bring it up so that y'all take a look into this word, being in a polyamorous relationship. Okay. And polyamory is when you and your partners, or it's the understanding that you can love more than one person in an intimate way. And that now, depending on what the agreements are, you and your partner or partners get to choose the capacity to which you are going to be in relationship with. And that can be physical, where it's all of you together, meaning you and your, whatever tertiary, triangle, whatever kind of partnerships you're sitting in. Or it may be that you have these singular relationships with your separate partners. That can be an expression. And just as you also mentioned, now when you're doing it on that kind of a level, when you're in relationship in that kind of a way, there is a pump up into how you are going to have to express, because what it breaks it down to is you have to be fundamentally on a base level on top of your communication game. Oh my gosh, right? It's critical, and be willing to really work from an understanding of trust and selflessness.
And a lot of selflessness. Yeah.
Because loving somebody is in the way to which we have been trained. And we live in a society that has been very much about the individual. And so there's this idea of possessiveness when we love. And like you mentioned so beautifully, Neil, that when I won't say truly, but when we love, it should be about flow. And the concept of supporting somebody from that ultimate space of how can we love? How can we support that person to be in their highest expression of self? Should have no boundaries, right? Should have no boundaries to it. And love is. So if I can love you, why is it not feasible that I can love another, but that not change how I love you?
Right. And also like support the person that you love who may love or have love for somebody else too as well, you know. And just like what you said about supporting, and that I think that connects with supporting the person you care about in rising up in their higher self. Because I
Mhm.
think when people can be in their higher self, in that space, that freedom, that transparency, and that authenticity, that's when like real deep intimacy can be born and just flourish, and honestly like really take like, you know, the relationship to like way deeper depths and expand into places you never even dreamed of, you know, based on my experience. I can only speak for myself, you know, but it's, yeah, for real.
I love this, Neil. We're coming up to our hour. So I once again, I thank you and appreciate you for just
Yes,
coming into this
appreciate it.
space. I love this conversation. I think there's so much more we can unravel with it as well.
We can
But
have a part
but
three, man. It's all good.
right? I think there is a lot there. And, you
Yeah,
know, I really would love to hear from everyone if you've had a chance to watch this now or later.
yeah.
Let me know what your thoughts are about being in partnership. Is the idea
Mm,
of traditional marriage the end all and be all, or are you open to maybe being, you know, trying out something in a different
yeah,
way, especially those of us who are, or people who are single, you know,
right.
and maybe looking to partner. Is it something you can could consider being in a partnership in a polyamorous way, which is the word of the day?
Hmm.
Look up polyamory,
Look it
see
up.
if it's something that may fit with you, and let's talk about it, because that's what these conversations are for. So Neil, let them know where they can find you. I didn't even do an introduction
No
this time.
worries. We just roll right into it. But yes, you can find me, you know, online. That's Logic 416. So that's Logic with a K, LOGIK 416, and that's, you know, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc., TikTok, all of that. So definitely find me, reach out. You can learn more about what we do. SFA, Stolen from Africa, is the movement. Do a lot in community. StolenFromAfrica.com, StolenFromAfrica.org is the website. Get in touch. We're super easy to connect with, and love having conversations, love building with community, because like, you know, this is just what we got to do. And I'm just so happy to be in this space where you know, it's not taboo anymore to just have open and honest, you know, conversations where we can like learn from each other, you know, that experiential learning, you know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Neil, for
Hey,
lending your wisdom, your voice, your time. And I know that this isn't the only one. Let's do this again,
yes,
because I really want to talk about next the
yeah.
conversation about the Métis and the wife, and this idea
Hmm.
of how we have allowed ourselves to show up in
Hmm.
this that space, especially in our community. Like, we all know about this being a thing, right?
Hmm.
And is there a cleaner way for us to be in this? You know, we've talked about the foundations of what marriage is now,
Yeah.
and maybe set some tools, but I want to talk about that. Is
Hmm.
it showing up in our communities already?
We're gonna find out.
Right?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. We'll connect.
Yes.